Hello and welcome to the latest webinar in the Elemental Talks programme. Our topic today, hydrogen, one gas network, many products, in our session sponsored by Hamworthy Heating. Your chair for the next 60 minutes, my name's Jim McClelland. I'm founder and editor of SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the top 500 rankings. Joining me on the panel this afternoon are Helen Boyle, Head of Regional Development, Cadent and Northwest Hydrogen Alliance, Alistair Young, Partner at Borough Happold, and Christel, Croft, Project Director, Decarbonisation, Groupe Atlantic, UK, ROI and North America, which is the parent company of Hamworthy Heating. It is all live, as you will see. We have a Q&A to finish, so pop your questions in the appropriately named Ask a Question box at the bottom. If you type them in there at the bottom of your screen, you pose them, I'll ask them, they'll answer them. So this webinar formed part of a program of talks hosted and produced by Element, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. elementalexpo.com. It's the online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. You'll find a full diary of events on the website, range of upcoming webinars. You can also view the back catalogue and a whole host of hot topics, all available on demand. Great who's who of speakers, and I should add, everything is free to access. Plus, next year, the physical, real-world, in-person Elemental Expo will take place at the NEC Birmingham, 21 to 23 June 2022. So see you there. Right, got a lot to cover today, so going to be a very brief intro from me. Hydrogen. So symbol H, atomic number 1. Hydrogen is the lightest and also the most abundant chemical element on the planet. Not surprising then, hydrogen gas as a low carbon fuel source, able to benefit from utilising existing gas network infrastructure, is a hot topic for energy transition now and over the coming decade. In terms of production though, hydrogen comes in many colours. Brown and black are the so-called dirtiest in terms of emissions, coming from lignite or bituminous coal respectively. Grey hydrogen, the most commonly available form derived from natural gas. With blue, the natural gas is split into hydrogen and CO2, often using steam, but the carbon's then captured to cut emissions. As the name suggests, green hydrogen is the cleanest, truly renewable version, produced by splitting water H2O into its hydrogen and oxygen components by means of electrolysis. And then, if you're still following with this rainbow, to complete the spectrum of colours, we have yellow, which is a variation on green, uses only solar power for electrolysis, and pink employs nuclear. So there you have it. The UK government's 10-point plan for green industrial revolution launched last November included a preliminary target 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production capacity by 2030. Those ambitions recently expanded upon with the new hydrogen strategy released this August. So there are, however, challenges ahead, questions unanswered for both the commercial and domestic heating. So today we'll be looking at what the recent heat and building strategy tells us, how hydrogen can be produced, what a hydrogen-ready boiler really is, plus what hurdles need to be overcome before it can be widely used to heat our homes and buildings. So as I said, a lot to cover, so let the debate begin. So as we start to explore the opportunities and challenges presented by hydrogen as a key element in both our environment and, of course, our drive towards net zero, I'd like to begin by asking our panel to introduce themselves, share some opening insights. So briefly, who are you? Where do you fit into the puzzle? Where are we right now with hydrogen and the decarbonisation of heat? So first, Alistair, as a global energy transition leader, it says on your business card, as it were, what role can hydrogen play on the road to net zero, Alistair?
Thanks, Jim. I hope you can hear me well. Thanks very much for the invite to participate today. It's a very timely discussion. My name is Alistair Young. I'm a partner at Borough Happold. Borough Happold is an independently employee-owned engineering consultant based in the UK, but we also have a global presence, particularly in the US, Europe, Middle East, and we recently opened an office in Australia. So it's a really one of the things that quite often comes across my desk is, what about hydrogen? What about hydrogen in energy? And of course, energy is a big space. We are primarily a built environment consultant, so I specialize in decarbonising cities effectively, or towns, regions. We do a lot of energy planning, a lot of engineering of campus scale, district scale energy systems. And that's everything from heating and cooling networks, HV power networks, and increasingly looking at clean gas solutions as well. So our clients are coming to us and saying, well, how do I how do I get off the gas grid? How do I get off of the natural gas grid anyway? And many of them are setting targets aligned to the kind of science-based targets, so looking to make substantial emissions reductions by 2030, or even getting to net zero by 2030. And so, we're looking at hydrogen as part of a range of options of solutions in terms of making that move away from using natural gas, which is a great fuel apart from the carbon emissions. So there's a real big challenge there from an engineering and an economic point of view to move away from that. So that's really, we're independent. We're looking at all the different kinds of solutions, and we see hydrogen as part of a tool set, if you like, in that process.
Excellent, thank you, Alistair. Nice intro. So energy planning, engineering, campus and district scale. Good name check there for science-based targets, and hydrogen is on and moving up the menu of options progressively. So Helen, if I come to you, the point of view of the UK's largest gas distribution network and wearing your Northwest regional hat too. So talk to us about hydrogen, please, Helen.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'm Helen Boyle, Head of Regional Development for the Northwest and the West Midlands for Cadent. Cadent is the UK's largest gas distribution network operator, owning and operating 4 out of the 8 networks. So as you can imagine, we're very keen on helping people understand the transition away from natural gas to green gases, clearly including hydrogen. And as Jim describes it in a really good way, it's part of the toolkit for decarbonisation for the future. So there's a lot that we're doing, both on the engineering side and really on the stakeholder engagement side, and on production, not producing it ourselves, but working with producers to help to understand the future role that hydrogen can play across a number of different sectors. And there's more surety in some sectors than there are in others. And what I would say is, I think that the next 5 or so years are really crucial ones when it comes to the growth of a low carbon economy, and understanding the role that hydrogen could play, up to 35% of the future energy mix, which is what the hydrogen strategy released over the summer, the back end of the summer, talked about. So really from Cadent, we're leading on a number of projects and involved in a number of others, but also working collectively with the distribution network operators, the electricity side of things, to provide what we refer to as a whole systems view. So this very much isn't gas versus electricity, it's gas working with electricity to provide a solution for the future. And you have an energy mix at the moment, you'll have an energy mix in the future. It will just look different to what it is at the moment. And the next few years will be crucial to understanding what that future mix looks like.
Excellent, thank you, Helen. Yes, there is an urgency, and it's a transition scenario. Good to hear you talk about stakeholder engagement as well as simply engineering, and also working with producers. And of course, we're working at scale. It is very much a team game if we're going to have ambitions towards 35% of the energy mix. And so if I come to you now, Christel, when it comes to decarbonisation of heating and hot water, if I could ask you, where does hydrogen sit within the market for you at present?
Hello, Jen, and hello to everyone. So thank you for the invitation as well. So I'm Christel Croft, and I'm the project director for decarbonisation for Groupe Atlantic. And you know us under numbers of brands: Ideal Heating, Hamworthy, of course, and Gladial for domestic hot water cylinders. So what we're looking at really is looking about the strategy in terms of the country. So we've been reading all the important documents, the 10-point plan, the UK hydrogen strategy, and the Hilton building strategy. And what is very clear is there's not a single silver bullet anymore. So we used to have natural gas boiler in about 23 million homes, when you think about it. 80% of the boilers are combi boilers, so they can make both domestic hot water at the same time and heating. And the transition, the challenge will be how to continue to sustain the level of comfort that people are using today. Now, this is very clear that when you look at the heating and building strategy, there is more about the electrification of the product. So we're talking about heat pumps, we're talking about direct heating, we're talking about heat networks as well. So at the moment, for example, even heat networks is quite small into this country. There's an ambition to go to probably up to 18-20%. And of course, hydrogen. So we are interested in hydrogen. So both of a blend for 20% application. So when we can start reducing some of the CO2 emission by using some blending, and also 100% hydrogen. So the decision between all these products is going to be really multifaceted, because it's really about the dwelling itself, the use, the application, the level of insulation, the financial incentive, the skills, also the regional area, because if you're lucky enough to be close to a hydrogen cluster, it will be making sense, or if you off-grid. So no single bullet anymore, but a mix of different technical solutions, and we're looking at them all.
Thank you, and a really good run through some of the different aspects there. Strategic view, electrification, obviously high on the agenda, but as you say, no silver or green bullet, if you like. Very multifaceted solutions. Talk of blending, and of course a nice check there for comfort. You know, we need to remember the user experience in all of this as well. So, thank you. So that's nice round of introductions there, but then this section I've tagged sort of challenges and conflicts, so that gives you a clue as to where we're going with that. And I've already seen a question pop up in the chat, and I encourage you to write them also in the ask a question button at the bottom, and we'll come to them for the closing section of the debate. So challenges and conflicts. I'd like to zoom in on specifics, begin by challenging the panel a bit now as to why we still have such a long way to go with hydrogen and heat, and whether we are actually on target. So what might the problems be? Investment, innovation, policy, planning, skills, regs? What needs to change or accelerate? Maybe all of the above, to help hydrogen deliver on its promises, and importantly, fast. So Helen, let's start with you, and if I could throw out a reality check. So the UK hydrogen strategy targets 5 gigawatts of low carbon production by 2030. It said might unlock as much as 4 billion of investment, create 9,000 jobs. But, here's the but, the plan came out late. The expectation is for just 1 gigawatt by 2025. So I'd like to open by asking you, really, should we believe the hype?
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of things going on that aren't necessarily high on the kind of public awareness agenda around hydrogen, and to answer some of the questions that still exist, to understand the role that it will play in the future. Production's one element of that. If we take the Northwest, and just echoing what Christel is saying, what we know is decarbonisation will be delivered regionally. There is no one national top-down solution to it. It will look different, and will be different from a timing perspective, depending where you are in the country. But if we look at an area I know well in the Northwest, and HyNet recently getting its Track 1 status, it will be producing blue hydrogen, 3 gigawatts of blue hydrogen to the middle of this decade. So that's you know a lot, 70-odd% of the government's target right there. And clearly Teesside was another industrial cluster that was Track 1 status. So those two will be operational, providing all the contracts and everything is sorted out by the middle of this decade. And we would really encourage and like to see all the industrial clusters up and running, because we need as much hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen, that really we can get our hands on. You need the production to meet the demand, to keep pace with where policy is going over the next few years. And Christel was right to talk initially about blending, and then moving to 100% hydrogen. So you have the High Deploy programme, which is something that Cadent is leading on, which is all about blending up to 20% hydrogen into the existing gas infrastructure without any impact to people's appliances or any industrial and commercial processes, because clearly people don't just use gas for heating homes, they use it in industrial settings as well. So that High Deploy programme is aimed at providing government with the evidence it requires around blending for that 2023 date that was on the 10-point plan. But you need the financial models to make hydrogen the business case for hydrogen. So the things that were really important things that came out of the hydrogen strategy were the consultations on the back of it, the consultation around, well, what is low carbon hydrogen? What's the definition of that? What does it look like? But also the financial models to support that. Is that going to look like a contract for different type structure like we have with offshore wind, and UK leads the world with offshore wind now? Is that what we're looking to see in terms of hydrogen production? That's what we're expecting. But we talk to a lot of people who are looking to invest in hydrogen. Excuse me. They don't tell us they don't have any money or they don't want to invest. They want to know what those financial models are, and then they're going to get their checkbooks out. So really I think we're it's like riding the big one at Blackpool. We're right at the very top, and we're waiting for those consultations and those decisions. And I really do think you're going to see a roller coaster take off then. And I think, like Christel says, it makes sense that where you've got a lot of hydrogen production, clearly you're going to prioritise decarbonisation of industry, and that's what the industrial clusters are about. But it makes sense to then look at what other sectors you can use that hydrogen for around that area. And in the Northwest, what we're looking to do as well, that was something else on the 10-point plan, was a hydrogen village, which is a village running on 100% hydrogen for probably around 2 years in the middle of this decade, in order to provide BEIS with the information, some of the information that it's looking for to make a heat policy decision around hydrogen in 2026. So that's why, for us, the next 5 or so years are really, really crucial. Over and above hydrogen for transport and industry, what role hydrogen plays in domestic heating, particularly, the next 5 years are really crucial. And while that seems like a really long way off, there's a lot to do to make a hydrogen village and to make the decisions on blending, plus get hydrogen production going. And this isn't just blue hydrogen; it's green hydrogen as well. You need clarity over the financial models. You need the money going in, and then you need the engineering to happen. That doesn't happen in a few months.
Excellent. So some really nice insights in terms of the context there, the wider picture, importance of industrial clusters. Good to hear about 3 gigawatts blue hydrogen in the offing, hydrogen village. But as you said, we sort of need all hands on deck. Financial models, important point made there about the business case, which will need to be communicated if hydrogen is to follow in the low carbon footsteps, as it were, of offshore wind. So some really nice context there. So Christel, in this challenging section, if I come to you now, so gas boilers to be banned in new homes by 2025, but of course, what about retrofit? So the hydrogen boiler is touted as a like-for-like swap for a conventional gas model. However, almost every day on the news at the moment, as weather gets colder, we have fuel bills, and hydrogen is said to cost more. So my challenging question for you is, how do manufacturers hope to persuade homeowners and consumers to switch anytime soon? In short, what's the sales pitch, please?
That's a very good question. And I think when we talk about the sales pitch, it's if you look about the hydrogen, I'm going to remove the cost for the moment from the equation. I'm just talking about the practical side of it. When we look about the different technical solution for low carbon, people like the gas boiler because it's quick, because it's warm, because it's comfortable, because of the difference of price between the natural gas and the electricity. So at the moment, a lot of people really are reluctant to move away from gas boiler because of all the kind of positivity aspect to it. Now, if you want to think about hydrogen boiler, what it means is probably there is very little disruption for the customer. So you're going to use the same pipe. I know that the gas network have been working for years or decades to change some of the pipe to make them compatible for hydrogen. It means that the home heating system is kind of the same. So you're not going to have to change your radiator. Don't need to do another hot water cylinder because it's already there. So in terms of the customer, it's really easy. In terms of the installers, it's very easy too, because the gas installers, they know about gas, and hydrogen is still a gas. So in fact, the level of upskilling will be quite minimum compared to go, for example, to heat pump, if we want to compare. But also it can cope with a large fluctuation of supply and demand into the system. So there is a lot of good things about hydrogen that we need to consider. Now, not everything is a walk in the park. I think for me, one of the main challenge at the moment is to work, where are we going? Because we have seen the heat and building strategy. This is really towards electrification. I don't want to steer it up, but we've seen the impact of having a storm onto our electric network in the last few days. So when you think about having more heat pump, more electric vehicles, more everything, it's not only looking about the heating, it's about where is the electricity going to come from? Is it greener? Is it stable? There is also a question about the cost. So when we're talking about hydrogen, we talk about, at the moment, I would say free version is the 20% blend, as we mentioned before with Helen. We've been part of iDeploy, so we're kind of comfortable that we are compatible for the 20% blend. We cannot talk about certification yet, because at the moment the standards are still being developed, but I'm confident that when they're issued, they will be all right. And then we have hydrogen ready and hydrogen boiler. So hydrogen ready means that the boiler will leave the factory as a natural gas. And the day we have conversion in the field, you will have a conversion kit. So somebody going to your house.
It seems we possibly have a connectionist momentarily with Christel there.
But which still be in a certain level. So there's some notion about 10-15%. And then also it will be about the speed of the conversion itself when it does happen. Now, somebody asked a question about the cost of hydrogen relative to natural gas. This is a very key question for us. There is at the moment about 2.5 million people living in fuel poverty in the UK. So I think that some of the people will agree that being in a warm home with hot water is probably a human right. So what we need to make sure that when we discuss about all this technology, we look about the affordability. So there's new technology going on. There's smart systems, so how to help people, how to face tariffs and everything. But this is a quick question. And for us, as a manufacturer of boilers, we are very, very keen to understand about the affordability and how the gas price is going to go down. Now, everybody say with the increase of capacity of hydrogen, you will expect the price to go down in the future. Now, for me, and maybe it's a question more for the gas network, where do they see this price to land into the future?
Good point. Thank you, Christel. We lost you momentarily, but I think we got 99% of what you were saying. So nice points about effectively little disruption on the face of it, easy for the customer and importantly for the installer, minimal upskilling, crucial point because we know the skill shortage is putting pressure on a lot of sectors and supply chain scenarios. Question marks raised rightly perhaps about electrification and the ambitions there in terms of infrastructure and resilience, shall we say. Good point about explanation about hydrogen ready. And I mean, a lot of these phrases really blending hydrogen ready, they do epitomize the fact we are in a transition phase. You know, we are on the way to a lot of these scenarios and we need these interim steps. But then I very much welcome your comments about fuel poverty and affordability, because again, as the winter gets colder, there are a lot of homes in the UK, they'll be faced with choices of heat or eat, you know, already. And anything that puts pennies on the bill is only going to make things worse. So yeah, good point in terms of the challenges there. So thank you. So Alistair, the third in this this conflicts and this throwing the gauntlet down bit. So we're talking about joined up thinking and doing. So individual buildings and boilers are one thing, but when we start to scale up and we look, as you mentioned, at the level of communities, even cities, with the country's first hydrogen town planned for 2030 maybe, do the pieces of that jigsaw really fit together? Do the numbers even add up at scale?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting challenges that Helen and Celeste have touched on, and certainly, you know, the heat and building strategy, I think, made it very clear that there's big questions about the role of hydrogen in heating. It's clearly going to be in my view anyway, an important energy vector in a system scale, particularly. Celeste talking about the resilience of the electricity system. You know, we've committed in the UK to net zero electricity grid by 2035. Fantastic gains in the last decade on decarbonising the grid, and now we're kind of looking towards what happens those low wind periods, cold weather periods, and that there's a clear role I think there for sort of interseasonal large capacity storage, which hydrogen fits well in, and that's been identified by organisations like Energy Systems Catapult and its predecessor ETI, many years ago, probably 10 years ago, as a key role for hydrogen. Helen's touched on the industrial process side of it. I mean, I started my career in the pulp and paper industry in the Northwest, actually. Huge energy demands, very difficult to do affordably with an electric solution. So I think clear role for hydrogen there. I think in terms of transport, our former chairman has a hydrogen car. He's a real advocate of hydrogen for transport. But I think there's a sort of VHS Betamax issue there. So it might be a better a better product, but actually the scalability and deployment that battery electric vehicles have seems to be kind of winning in that one. And then, I think for heating, you've got a lot of questions around hydrogen, picking up to start with on carbon. So one is the speed and scale of decarbonisation offered. We're kind of, are we going to bet the house, pardon the pun, on a technology that's not yet proven? It won't really be proven until a period of time where we need to already be delivering major carbon reductions. I think, hydrogen blend 20% sounds good, but it only gives you 7% reduction in emissions. So really, it's about the pure hydrogen side of it. I think there are some questions around hydrogen safety in the networks, and obviously that's a piece of work I think Helen would probably be better able to comment on than I do. But I did see a fellow engineering consultancy getting pilloried online about its report into hydrogen safety in the home by some sort of process engineering expert. So I won't touch on that, but it's clearly a consideration. Because hydrogen and small molecules like helium are used to test, to test pipework for leakage, because they kind of find the leaks. So there's some issues around that, I think. Also at city scale is the transition. We made the transition from town gas in the 70s. I wasn't around to see that at the time, but it's not clear that we have kind of done anything similar since then, and that was that probably was more of a situation where most people had gas cookers rather than gas central heating. Central heating's really come in a big way since then. And then I also think this issue of where I hadn't had pink hydrogen actually before, Jim. That was a new one to me, I must admit. But green versus blue, I think, is the key discussion here, and I think some really interesting work coming out on future cost of green hydrogen, and actually likely potentially to surpass the cost of blue hydrogen. But that's based on the cost of electricity generation coming down, and a lot of the hydrogen industry's targeting this kind of $1.50 a kilogram kind of target for hydrogen, which works out about, depending on exchange rates and stuff, sort of 4 to 5p a unit per kilowatt hour. Which if you add in the gas network cost is maybe 6p, something like that. Which feels like a reasonable benchmark. But that seems to be depending for green hydrogen on a significant reduction in the cost of electrolyzers, which I think is likely because it's a technology that will scale a bit like we see with batteries and solar, but it's depending on getting electricity costs down to something like £20 a megawatt hour, which is sort of maybe half or a third even of what we see at the moment. And obviously if that's coming down to that level, then the alternative technologies like heat pumps are also coming down in price. So I think there's a number of big questions around hydrogen. I wouldn't like to sit here with my crystal ball and say whether it will or won't be. I suppose it's a sliding scale. Is it the majority of the solution, or is it a part of a solution in those areas where, like the Northwest, where you might have hydrogen clusters and it's more kind of localized. Yeah. So I think,
Excellent. Good number of points there, and raised many more questions in your answer, I guess. So energy vector at system scale. Good points about industrial models, of course, where the cost and affordability makes sense. Transport, not so much. EVs dominant. Talking about the 20% turning into 7%, and a good number of questions raised. Also heard your mention of electrolyzers. I was seeing some figures from Bloomberg NEF suggesting that the number shipped this year will be double the number last year, which suggests the sheer demand, the majority are going to China, I would add, but it's the sheer demand, and as you suggest, like everything scaling up, we assume costs and affordability and rollout will accelerate, we hope. I don't know, Helen, I don't know whether you wanted to come back at all on the sort of questions you raised about risk and those sorts of question marks.
There's quite a few things I want to come back on there, but I think, Christel, you had your hand up before me, so I don't know if you want to.
She did actually, yeah, you were up first, but go on then, Christel, go first.
Well, I think we're going probably to answer the same thing. I think the safety absolutely is essential. So every appliance we're developing at the moment, really, we need to follow the legislation and never to go beyond that. So it's I find quite interesting, and it's a personal kind of anecdote. But when I moved into this country 15 years ago, I was absolutely terrified because I have a gas boiler in my house. For me, having natural gas into my house was terrifying, despite I used to live 15 miles away from a nuclear plant, and I never stopped sleeping about it. So I think perception of risk sometimes is quite an emotional thing. But very seriously, we are taking all the safety as a very key requirement, and all the work which is done around hydrogen is extremely monitored. A lot of studies done in theory, in practice, and this is really essential. So I think Helen is going to confirm that probably in a second. The other things about when we're talking about the different technology and choices, I think one of the main challenge for us is hydrogen valuable? Yes, it is. It's extremely valuable. But at the moment, the supply is going to be probably less than the demand. And so where is the best value for hydrogen? Do you want to have it into heating or into industrial applications? So when you have the big industrial clusters, steel production or kind of cement or everything like that, are you better to use the hydrogen you got for reducing this big and very, I would say, precise area of emissions or more kind of heating? So there's plenty of questions there, which are really, really interesting to see about where this is going to go. And there's a question about the electricity for hydrogen boiler. Yes, we still need to have electricity to run boilers because you have pump, circulating pump and everything. But I think that if you have a balance between all the electrics and some kind of a gas boiling system, you put less pressure onto the network. And of course, you can have some local way of producing electricity using some kind of solar panel or anything like that, or some batteries. So I pass to Helen.
No, good point. Thank you, Christel, because you picked up we'd already picked up Mark Hand's question in the chat section about the cost. Picked that up to a point, and then Chris Dunham, who'd asked exactly as you answered there about the need for electricity for the pump, circulation pump functions, the hydrogen boiler, etc. Of course, it would reduce peak demand, and as you say, could perhaps be generated locally via the solar panels. So, Helen, then, so you've got all of that, the risk, and if I could also ask you maybe to add a little comment on the way you think the cost trend is going to go as well. So you've got both the fun things, risk and cost, Helen, if you'd like to add a little comment, please.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the production and the cost, we're not a hydrogen producer, so we distribute gas and we're not allowed to produce it. So the information that we have access to will be the same as everyone else, and the same kind of that we've already talked about already. But it seems obvious that as soon as you get scale, costs come down. So just kind of picking up on a number of points, and Christel's talked about the safety, and all the gas networks are working together, and with BEIS and with producers and the whole kind of technology chain to ensure that anything's safe. Nothing will get past and nothing will be used unless it is safe. So I mean that's almost your gate check before anything else then happens. So there's an enormous amount going on in that area. I think I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that Alistair talked about in terms of, so when we think about hydrogen for transport, probably should have been a little bit clearer. I don't think about it in terms of private vehicles. Absolutely, they're EVs, and that's already on the right road, and it's impossible not to come up with lots of puns when you talk about transport. But when we think about hydrogen for transport, we're thinking about the heavier goods end of things. And also we're involved in a project in Manchester where we're talking to different groups at the moment who are interested in adopting hydrogen transport technology, and you've got people who are or organisations that maybe have first responder vehicles that can't afford to be off the road and charging. So while they may be smaller vehicles that you could easily see be an electric one, actually they can't spend any downtime charging. You need a 5-minute refueling, off, out, go again. So there are certainly applications for hydrogen in transport that we think are a bit of a no-brainer, but actually where the thing that's causing the blockage, if you like, and it's one thing you kind of talked about before, was where do we need things kind of helping and looking at, is more the cost for the technology there. So the cost of a hydrogen waste vehicle is enormously more expensive than even an electric one, as opposed to a diesel one at the moment. So you're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation there, because those costs won't come down until more people buy them, and people won't buy them until those costs come down. So you're in a bit of an odd loop there. Also want to just pick up the green versus blue debate, which we're hearing an enormous amount. And for us, clearly as a gas distributor, what we want is low carbon hydrogen in our pipes. And yes, we've talked a lot about transition, and we see this again as being a transition. You need blue to get the economy going. You need blue to get those big volumes of hydrogen out there, needed and being used, in the next few years. And then those costs will come down for green. There'll be more renewable electricity available to then be used for the production of hydrogen. It makes sense for that renewable electricity that's on the grid at the moment to be used in the grid rather than for production of hydrogen. But on the whole, those costs will come down. So it's a transition period. Blue is needed to stimulate the economy. So those are the points that I wanted to come back on.
Excellent. Good. So we're really getting into the issues now. And I want to save a bit of time. I've already had a couple of questions in via Twitter and LinkedIn. Do pop your questions in the Ask a Question at the bottom. So now this is the last round of questions from me, and we'll keep it brisk so that we save time for the others. And having done the challenges and conflicts, we'll be glad to hear this is the reasons to be cheerful bit. So we're going to look at what if we are successful and we do create these sustainable approaches and we do see the rollout of hydrogen infrastructure and technologies and we do drive forward that low carbon future. So Christel, crystal ball time, as it were. Fast forward maybe 5 to 10 years. Could you just give us a flavour of what the future will look like for you as manufacturers?
Well, I think for us, it will be clearly a mix of technology. So we can see hydrogen, we can see heat pump, we can see heat network, we can see electrification being really, really key. So to say exactly which one is going to be at what part, I think it's going to be a journey and a transition. So hydrogen is likely to become a blend from 23, 25, and then probably becoming more localized clusters into 100% area by 2030, 2035 and beyond. So we're going to have that, but it doesn't mean that we have to sit on our hands, because in fact we don't. What we continue doing is to improve the efficiency of what we've got today. So we have a lot of discussion of people saying, do I need to wait until the hydrogen boilers are coming? Well, even if you have an hydrogen boiler, even if you buy one tomorrow, you don't have an hydrogen network to attach it to. So what we need to think about is continue to improve the product we're making. So we continue to develop high efficiency boilers, continue to go for low NOx option. We continue to work on the improving what we've got today, but we're also preparing ourselves for the future. So Hamworthy is part of Groupe Atlantic. Groupe Atlantic in France is one of the leaders of the heat pump market as well. So what we're offering, and we're looking at electrical products, so we're looking at the full suite, because I think this is to become very specific to the property, to the type of dwelling, to the level of insulation for the on-grid, off-grid, to everything. But it's really is going to be different. And also smart application, the development of clusters, electrical or hydrogen is going to become the future. So, and we prepared for it.
Excellent. So we hope it's going to be better, of course, but it is undoubtedly going to be different. And you gave a nice breakdown of some of the timelines, even 23, 25, etc., to see those steps happening and how we want to be progressing in terms of interim targets. So, Alistair, if I come to you now, and I'm going to ask you to think your most positive thoughts now. So this is rose-tinted spectacle stuff with your city's hat on. So how could truly low-carbon hydrogen become that game changer for the energy transition? So give us the most optimistic scenario, please, Alistair.
Well, so it was dangerous to ask an engineer to be optimistic, James. I do feel like I'm
out of your comfort zone.
I'm optimistic kind of person. I think, if I think of some of the work we're doing at the moment, working with, major universities like Edinburgh, King's College, we've worked with a number of others, big NHS hospitals. We're just starting looking at a city district in London, near one of the big stations. And the challenge there is, how do we become low carbon? And effectively, it's about the heating, as we've discussed. And I think, we've got to have solutions that provide the performance that people are used to. I think there's a big conversation about efficiency. We have the least efficient buildings in Europe, and investment in energy efficiency has fallen off a cliff in the last decade. I mean, it's a real scandal, actually. So let's that's not my optimistic hat on. We need to do more of that in whatever the fuel is. I think the role for me that I can see hydrogen being really effective in is we've gotten used to a kind of predict and provide model for energy. So everybody knows the story about half time the FA Cup. Everybody goes and makes a cup of tea.
Yep.
Probably a situation that is an anathema to people who grew up with on-demand television like my kids now. But we've got that predict and provide model. As we transition to more intermittent sources of energy, then actually we need to try to match demand to when supply is available. But people are creatures of habit, right? We're inherently diurnal. We get up generally around the same time. We generally go off and do our activities, broadly around the same time, and so you've got that kind of clash. And I see hydrogen as having a potential to kind of decouple that contrast. And if I go back to a practical issue, I've got a city district we're looking at. I know that we can put a heat pump in there and replace the gas CHP. I know that will work, and that will probably do something like 75% of the annual heating hours or annual demand of that system. So I'm getting something like a 70-80% carbon reduction. But I've still got to deal with when it's -2 outside, which does happen even in London, as we've seen recently. And the moment we deal with that by having a load of gas boilers, which are quite a affordable technology, and you run them pretty hard for maybe 100-200 hours a year. To do that with heat pumps or to do that with electric boilers is going to be very expensive, either from a capex or an opex point of view. So hydrogen I could see as being a kind of high value commodity that you use when other energy resources are scarce, if you see what I mean. So it's almost like this kind of hybrid model that people talk about for domestic heat pumps, which I think is maybe a bit complicated, but it could be something that you use in those short duration high load applications, and that means you don't have to reinforce the whole electricity grid and that type of thing. So it really needs a kind of systems perspective. I was very encouraged to hear Helen talking about the gas networks working with the electrical network operators. I sort of personally wonder whether they should be merged, but that's a different conversation. If they work together, that's the first step, isn't it? Because we do need a systems view on that.
Excellent. So good, strong points about systems view, high value commodity, moving on from that predict and provide, decoupling the sort of demand-led, very reactive approach that potentially could emerge. So some nice points there. And then the last then before Q&A, and the clock's ticking, so I'm going to be firing these questions at you in a moment. So Helen, quickly, and this is your reasons to be cheerful bit. This is looking forward, and this is where it's all going to be great. How can networks, regions, hubs, how can they help make the UK this fabled world leader in hydrogen? Please.
Well, I mean, I think the UK's got a massive opportunity, but just kind of echoing some of the points that we've said already, it will look different depending on where you are in the country and different timescales and how close you are to hydrogen production, and really from an end technology choice from a consumer perspective. What we would say, and this kind of goes to the point around DNOs and gas networks working together, we absolutely aren't anti-heat pumps. Heat pumps are right in some situations, but there are a lot of situations where heat pumps are going to be very, very difficult or unpalatable to the consumer who have got used to a very particular and easy form of heating. There's a question in the chat about what can we do in the short term or the interim, and just going back to, I think, something Christel said was around insulation and energy efficiency. It's never the wrong thing to do. So the best ton of carbon is a ton of carbon you don't emit in the first place. Yep. So that's first you insulate and make it efficient, and then you look to the end technology to fully decarbonize. So I mean, that's definitely something that people can be looking to do in the short term while some of the big questions are being answered. But gas and electricity providers working together to help local regions and local authorities, many of whom have set accelerated dates for decarbonisation, is definitely the right way forward, and is something I've seen. And I used to work for the local electricity distribution network operator in the Northwest before I joined Cadent, and that's something that they're all doing and very keen to do. So this kind of gas versus electricity debate isn't helpful. But if I think about the next 10 years or so, I think about blending. I think about, and it will be different depending on where you are, blending. Well, it seems like a 7% of carbon emissions. If you kind of roll that out across the country, it's 2.5 million cars off the road. So why wouldn't you? And then 100% hydrogen in the right situations, in the right properties, in the right regions. And it's about working out what that looks like across the UK, and then stitching it all together and ensuring you've got a really good customer experience, that nobody's left behind on the energy transition, and it delivers net zero by 2050 for UK PLC. So not a small problem.
No, a lot to do. Big challenges, but big opportunities. So very positive note there. And right, so we're moving into about the last 10 minutes now, so it's going to get increasingly quick fire. So I have a couple of questions that have come in via Twitter and LinkedIn. If I could also direct our panel, maybe when you're not answering my question, there's a couple of nice comments there, again from Mark Han and Chris Dunham. You could maybe type a little in the chat if you feel you have a response to add to that. They're expanding perhaps on some of the things we've talked about. But first, I've got a question come in via LinkedIn. I think I'll direct this to you, Alistair, first, if I may. So it's asking about other countries and cities that we could learn from. And I was noting, I think I got a press release from Siemens very recently, Amazon Prime documentary on a power reset for the first town in Germany. It's supposed to be powered by hydrogen, apparently. So, Alistair, I wonder if you could just throw out some names. Are there other countries and cities and towns and administrations that we should be looking at for additional ideas and insights, please?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've probably one of the most reliant countries on natural gas for heating. So you don't have to look too far away for alternative approaches. People talk a lot about Denmark is a classic kind of one for heat networks, but actually there are I feel like, without being disrespectful to the Danes, the larger European nations probably more interesting for us. Berlin as one of the world's largest heat networks, 1 million customers on that. France is pretty much all, a large proportion of electric heating, linked to the nuclear industry, with kind of quite good demand response, relatively crude but demand response type solutions for things like hot water cylinder controls, which obviously we've had in the UK through Economy 7. So I think it's hard to see and that many places going much faster than us on the hydrogen track. Maybe there's a kind of innovation, homegrown industry there, which we seem to be good at developing the kind of concepts for, and then getting the execution wrong. So I think on hydrogen, it's not so obvious that there are other leaders, but I know there are other nations struggling with this issue. We did a piece of work up in New England looking at replacement of their gas networks, which don't benefit from the kind of regulatory model that we have in the UK, where we have very safe networks. There are many parts of the states where they've underinvested in their gas networks, and they're busy blowing up and killing people quite often. So that there are different drivers in different parts of other parts of the world.
Excellent, good points, and nice to hear. In a sense, we are potentially going to be doing as much teaching as we are learning, which of course does open the door to exporting skills, technologies, know-how, which can be a very positive business force and entrepreneurial driver. Which brings us I have a question actually, which is a bit more political. It's come via Twitter. I'm going to throw this one in your direction, Helen. You'll be pleased to hear. So somebody's asked, is hydrogen part of the plan for levelling up? Now,
you hear that quite a lot.
Yeah, so I wonder if you could talk to me about how much that kind of regional engine driver is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, and it's so being from the Northwest, ironically one of the benefits now from opportunities around hydrogen is its industrial heritage, and the same same in Teesside and the same in South Wales and in Scotland, where you had the terminology cluster, but initially used for industry and all the benefits of clustering together brought, you now have the benefits of those clusters attracting the investment to produce hydrogen and decarbonise that industry. And then there's all the wider effects and positive opportunities that brings with it, that we, hydrogen used in other applications, skills, jobs, all that sort of thing. So you hear quite a lot about hydrogen being talked about as a levelling up, or decarbonisation being used as a levelling up opportunity, but particularly hydrogen around the industrial clusters, which many of which are in the north.
Excellent. Yeah, and you can see, for example, the first hydrogen bus in the UK, of course, was in Aberdeen, which, apart from being the granite city, is famous for oil. So you can see clearly there are also some of those skills and those transition opportunities in those places as well. And so I think we are moving now towards a close, but I have one more question. This one's for you, Christel. It's about innovation. I love this kind of question. It's about innovation versus scale. So I guess it's come via Twitter. What they're really asking is, should we be expecting dramatic advances in innovation and bling and fabulous technology that's going to catapult us forward? Or is it more about efficiency, rollout, price, all that stuff? So innovation or scale, Christel? Pick one.
Oh, that's a difficult one. And I'm going to not commit too much, because I think there's space for two. So in fact, in terms of innovation, I think the thinking about hydrogen for domestic boiler has been a huge, exciting scientific really challenge. So there's plenty of innovation being done. Now, we don't start from nothing, because hydrogen is still a gas, like natural gas. But there's very exciting innovation to be done. And I have to say that because of the work we're doing, ourselves and also our competitors, I must admit, I think everybody is working really on innovation. But you cannot make innovation if you're not going to make money at the end of it. Yep. So we can say that more nicely than that, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to sell this boiler at scale and to make sure that there is a market. So when we develop innovation, we're not doing pure chemistry or combustion studies. It's part of the equation, but really is to offer a product on the market that people can run, afford, and could be installed. So what we're not talking about doing hydrogen boiler at the 100 units level. We're talking to go to millions of hydrogen boilers.
Yep.
So that's why you need the innovation to be able to do that, because if you don't have this creativity to start with, you won't have the technical knowledge to make it affordable, safe, and everything. So in this case, it's not one or the other, it's both.
Excellent, good point. And millions, not hundreds. And it's really nice to end on the point that this isn't some kind of merely an intellectual concept we're discussing here. It's practical, it's business, it's numbers, it's sales, and if it's going to be sustainable, the economics of it have to work for the manufacturers and the producers and everybody involved in that supply chain. So that's us then. We are just about out of time, so I'm going to just close by saying, obviously, a big thank you to our panelists. We've really covered some good ground, and also thank you for adding some comments in the chat, which are helpful as well. So thank you, Alistair, Helen, of course, Christel, and our sponsors at Hamworthy Heating. To yourselves out there, our virtual audience on Crowdcast, for your comments and your questions. I'll throw in a reminder to check out elementalexpo.com, the online community for professionals focused on innovation, heat, water, air, and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. In case you missed it at the top of the show, full diary of events is on the website, including upcoming webinars, back catalogue of recent sessions available to watch on demand, including this one almost immediately after we've finished. You can go back to the start and rewatch the first 10, 20 minutes if you missed them. You can share it with a colleague. You can pass it on to a customer. So it's very accessible and readily available, and of course, all free on demand. So thank you once again to my panel. Great session today. That's it from me, Jim McClelland, editor at SustMeme. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.